You didn't push a single stroke today. A motor did all of the movement, but within a couple of hours of sitting in your chair, somehow you're still exhausted. You're tired, not physically spent, mentally drained. It's the kind of tired where your head is thinking, I just need to get out of this chair. And you may be wondering, how in the world am I already tired? I haven't even done much, and I'm exhausted. Well, you're not tired because you didn't do anything. You're tired because your body has been putting in the work and tolerating pain and discomfort, and nobody's made that obvious to you. Now, I'm going to tell you the answer up front because it's not complicated. The single biggest cause of exhaustion in power chairs is that you're not moving. And your chair almost certainly has the ability to move you. You were just never taught what those functions are actually for. That's the what. The whole rest of this video is the how, because move more is pretty useless advice on its own. And there are three other things underlying that will keep draining you even if you do understand how to move more frequently. My name is KJ Phillips. I'm an ATP and SMS. Welcome to Adaptive Solutions. Let's get right to it. All right. I had a patient in her 40s who had just cycled through cushions nonstop, settling on the one that hurt the least. Because all of them really sucked for her. I mean, they made it difficult for her to sit with any level of comfort. Air cushions, gel cushions, foam cushions. She had been through the gamut, and she was still exhausted. So what do you do when sitting hurts? Do you get out? Do you go to bed? Do you go back into your chair after a little break? Do you just stay home, maybe not taking big trips anymore? Your whole life ends up centered around your home. If you think you can't tolerate much time in the chair at all, you may not go out on these long excursions to begin with. And this may not even be a conscious decision. It kind of just happens as a feeling of like distaste in your body when you think about going out to somewhere like Disneyland. You just think about it and you're already thinking in your body like, oh my God, there's no way. And you know what? For 40 years, she hardly complained about it because she thought that's just what a wheelchair was. She thought that pain was normal and that it was the cushion failing her. Well, it wasn't. I taught her something about wheelchairs she never knew, even though she'd been using one for most of her life. And it's just one part of what causes fatigue in powered wheelchairs. She didn't actually need a whole different cushion. In fact, the cushions she had were working really well for her comparatively. What she needed to know was how to prevent the fatigue in her chair to begin with. Let's get this big principle out of the way because everything else from the video hangs off of it. In a manual wheelchair, fatigue makes pretty obvious sense. You're pushing. You're using smaller muscles to do the work that bigger muscles do for everyone else. And at the end of the day, you're just physically wiped out. That fatigue is totally different. You can point exactly to where it comes from. And I made a whole video on shoulder pain and exhaustion from pushing a manual wheelchair. Go watch it. A power wheelchair is different. In a power chair, you're not paying for the work you did. This is more like a tax on the work you didn't know you were doing. And here's what I mean. Right now, watching this, if you're able-bodied or if you're in a chair, you're probably moving. You're like shifting a little bit. You lean, you cross your legs, you uncross them, maybe you roll your shoulders back. You don't really consciously decide to do that. Your body does it for you. Dozens of times, an hour, all day, your whole life. That's kind of like constant micro movements is how a body stays comfortable. This is not a bug. This is a feature of our system. Now, a lot of folks end up in power chairs or that are using power chairs use them because moving is exceptionally difficult. Walking is either out of the question, temporary, or exceptionally difficult, maybe at a big risk for falling, like if you have multiple sclerosis or ALS. And shifting your weight in any kind of meaningful way is going to be from difficult to impossible. You could be quadriplegic, multiple sclerosis, ALS, you had a stroke, maybe you have cerebral palsy. All of these are very different and have significant factors that keep you from moving around in the way that a lot of us do. But guess what? You've got a piece of equipment paid for by your insurance, and they don't pay for these for everybody. They pay for these for a very narrow portion of the population. If you have a severe neurological condition or some type of myopathy or deformity, congenital deformity. Basically, your insurance will pay for a wheelchair so that you can stay moving, a lot more independent. All of these are significant factors in moving around, and you have a very expensive piece of equipment paid for by your insurance to help you keep moving, to basically stay active in life. But that doesn't mean anybody ever taught you how to use that chair to its best advantage. That's the whole video right here today. When your body can't make these corrections, one of two things happen. Either the chair supports you, or your body puts in the work to support you, and your muscles will do it, all day without ever being asked. And that's where your fatigue can come from in power wheelchairs. So let's find out where the leaks are first. One thing I should say right away, having your body do work is not the enemy. After a spinal cord injury, after a stroke, a TBI, some of that work is actually exactly how you regain function and you reestablish connections that have been hurt or damaged, impaired. You want to be putting effort into doing things. You don't want to be sitting in a chair or sitting in bed all day doing nothing. That's actually horrible for your rehab. What you're looking for is a balance point. On one end, the chair supports you so much that you do nothing. You're lazy. You sit in the chair staring at the TV all day. On the other hand, you have a chair that supports you so little, you don't use it. You stay in it for 20, 30 minutes, and then you're tired and you just want out. So there's somewhere in between. I bring this up because some clinicians hesitate to prescribe or recommend power wheelchairs. They worry a patient will get lazy in it and let their muscles atrophy. And that concern is not imaginary. But for the people we were talking about in this video, we're imagining that you aren't just lazy, you're being held back by your equipment. You're trying to live your life. You just need better support from the chair to do that. You do want to find that Goldilocks zone where the chair supports you enough to do things, but not so much that you're not using any of your own muscles and trying to reestablish connections that have been lost. So that's the idea. Let's get to it. Starting at the very foundation, as we very often do, your pelvis. What's underneath your pelvis? Your cushion. Number one, most common by a mile. Here's the principle I say in a lot of my videos because it's the one that matters a lot. Most of your seating issues start at the pelvis. You're the foundation of your posture. And this one is actually so common that people just kind of get used to it. They forget about it. They think, well, yeah, of course, my butt hurts. That's just what happens. I've been sitting. Here's the thing. The fatigue and the pain in your bottom is not a constant. It's not a given. It's a variable. And that variable depends on an equation of the pressure, meaning kind of the weight of your body. Let's simplify it. Divided by the surface area sharing that weight. If you've got the same weight with more tissue underneath supporting it, if you have a generous amount of adipose tissue, or in other words, like a big butt, kind of like big legs, that weight has more padding and healthy tissue to support it, and it gets distributed more easily. If you have very little extra tissue under there, you're going to feel that pain of sitting right away. So if you don't have tissue naturally helping to distribute the weight underneath you, that's where things like cushions are really important. Cushions do two things. They help to distribute or offload that pressure, and they give you a foundation of stability for your posture. If you want more on that, one of my earliest videos is an expert's review of cushions and a thorough breakdown with pressure mapping. So go watch it after this one. and you can understand a lot more in depth about how different cushions handle those two jobs. But in short, say you weigh like 100 pounds, just to make the numbers nice and easy. When you're sitting, a big chunk of that is landing right underneath your pelvis. And your pelvis has these two pointy prominences at the bottom. Those are called your ischial tuberosities, or ITs, sometimes called sit bones. You'll hear any of those names. A lot of the time they land when you sit right about where your butt cheek meets your thigh. There's like a crevice or a fold there. And I'm using very simple terms because, come on, let's be real. What are we really talking about? As I've covered in other videos, you're not properly loading your weight onto your thighs, or I should say, if you're not properly loading weight through your thighs, of that 100 pounds, even more gets concentrated right underneath those two bony spots, which is the least comfortable, most risky place to load pressure. That's where discomfort is actually going to accrue the fastest. If you can't stand your chair, you just get tired of it really quickly, and you haven't already localized it's because my butt hurts, that might be part of the problem. When it's concentrated under a bony spot, the tissue will either get pinched, or if you're sliding, even worse, it's going to get roll and stretch the tissue. That's what shear is. Blood flow to the area drops. Blood flow out of the area drops, just as important. The cells in that tissue get squeezed or stretched, and the signal your body sends when that's happening is, I'm uncomfortable. And it builds up over time. This actually accumulates. The whole body, I've got to get out of this chair. I got to get back to bed. I've got to get to the couch. This is not just a mood or a feeling. This is your body's interpretation of your tissues asking for relief that it's not getting. And here's what people miss. Cushions are definitely not made all the same. There are cushions that are more appropriate for part-time wheelchair users. Someone who sits for a couple hours, gets in the chair, gets out of the chair, maybe is walking around part-time. And there are cushions built for the highest risk individuals. People with essentially no extra loading tissue underneath, no ability to relieve the pressure underneath their own bottom, where the cushion either does an outstanding job of distributing that 100 pounds or offloading the most risky parts of your body, which would be right underneath those sit bones. If you're wondering what I keep meaning when I say distribute or offload, again, go watch the expert's review of cushions. Lots and lots of good info there, even though it is one of my earlier videos. If you want the technical side of why that hurts and what's really going on underneath that stretched or compressed tissue, go watch the video I made called What the Bleep Are Pressure Wounds. That one gets into what's actually happening underneath your skin when you compress or stretch the tissue. So if you're having problems with the cushion that you're on and you can't sit more than an hour or so without feeling that fatigue set in, it's definitely worth taking a look at what kind of cushion you're using and whether there's a more appropriate one for your goals, your specific goals. And that's why I can't tell you what cushion to use. Everybody's got different goals. Step 1, if you're feeling fatigued and just tired of being in your chair after only a short amount of time, I'm talking 30 minutes, maybe an hour, check the foundation that you're sitting on. Start at the bottom with your cushion. All right, real quick. If you're new here, the purpose of this channel is to raise the standard in assistive technology by giving high quality, easily digestible information and education at no cost to patients, to clinicians, to my peers, which is just part of my quest to improve lives and unlock potential in others. All right, back to it. Number 2, if you're feeling fatigued after sitting, you need to look at the dimensions and support of your chair itself. The principle behind this is that your chair needs to provide you stability at your core. Because when you go to do things at your extremities, grasping, lifting, holding, writing, typing, cooking, getting dressed, if you aren't stable at your core, your extremities will tense up as they need to provide the stability that your core doesn't have, and you'll be less able to move freely. Like they say, if you've read any of the textbooks to pass the ATP exam, you've read this phrase, proximal stability equals distal function. When you have stability at your core, by whatever means, it becomes much less fatiguing to do things with your extremities. That could be your hand, your fingers, your elbows, if you have switches at your elbows. It could be your foot. Maybe you drive your powered wheelchair with a foot pedal. It's rare, but it exists. All of it. Maybe you have head switches. So if you find it really tiring and you notice you're like really tense in your extremities, your shoulders, your arms, your neck, a good place to start thinking is, do I have enough of the right support at my core? When I say core, like, what does that really look like? It could be like a seatbelt laid across your lap, cinched down, not diagonal like in a car, down to press your legs down into the cushion, to create a little bit of a barrier for you to slide forward. It might mean that you need more appropriate lumbar support. With good lumbar support, you can find a balance point where you don't have to hold your head up so much. That curve in your lumbar and thoracic spine is actually what lets you balance and center your upper shelf, your shoulders and your neck over your pelvis instead of being in front of your pelvis. When your pelvis tilts back, your shoulders round, and your neck muscles have to hold your head up. When your pelvis is appropriately supported and you have lumbar support, you can open up your shoulders and more or less balance your head over the stack of your spine, which is much more of what you're looking for. All right, this is where the measurements of your chair and the support that's built into your chair come into play. If your chair is like really wide, too wide for you, it doesn't give you lateral stability. And so you may end up like wedging yourself against one side of the chair with your hip and maybe on your elbow on the other side, just to get that core stability so that you can do things functionally. Maybe you need lateral support. And this is where it gets tricky for people who've had a traumatic injury, because you absolutely do not want the chair supporting you so much that your body does nothing for work all day. You do want your body to be working, just not working so hard that you give up on doing things because it's too hard. It's a very fine balance. And this is extremely individualized. Are you the kind of person who, given that support, will just collapse into it and do nothing and let your muscles atrophy? Maybe take some of that support off so that you're working more throughout the day. Or if you're like a hard-headed go-getter, I'm going to put in the work anyway, who takes that support and uses it to do more than you would have done otherwise, now we're talking about getting a supportive chair that enables you to do things which you could not have done otherwise. It would have been too difficult. That's mostly my goal, is believing that people with the right support will do more instead of less. But honestly, both exist. So here's how I'd have you check this at home. Get into your chair, get into your usual, most, comfortable posture, and take a big deep breath. And then just empty your lungs. Let your body fall where it falls. Do you fall left, right? Do you fall forward? If you've been sitting that way a long time, your proprioception of where straight is might actually be off. So if you're so used to sitting in the awkward position where you can't actually tell whether you're sitting up straight or falling, in that case, check a mirror. But this is my number one easiest way to check. Is my chair supporting my body when I don't? Or is it making it more difficult for me to sit up? If you fall forward like nose to your knees, you probably are not getting the support at your pelvis and that lumbar support at your thoracic spine that you need in order to relax into a tall posture. If you fall one way, left or right, that could be an issue starting at the pelvis. And depending on whether you have an obliquity, maybe you need some kind of wedging or a special cushion, or it could be an issue up at the trunk Totally depends person to person. What does not depend person to person is if it costs you work to sit up, that's a tax you pay throughout the whole day on everything you do, every minute you're in the chair. And so if you're somebody who wants to do a lot and doesn't want to pay those extra taxes all the time just for sitting up tall, you want your chair helping you do that instead. All right, this next one is more specific to those in a power chair. Take a look at where your accessories are. Your joystick. Maybe you drive with like a head control or a chin control on a boom. At this point, we're already talking here about like C-level spinal cord injuries, meaning quadriplegic, maybe late stage ALS, patients that are, over time extremely weak, like spinal muscular atrophy. People with very little ability to move their own body at the core and who need to drive with specialty, extremely light touch or sensitive drive controls. A big part of using those controls well is that you are positioned in just about the same spot every time and you stay there. That even means that when you fatigue, you don't drop forward. So think about where your joystick actually is and whether you'd prefer it somewhere else. Here's one extreme example, and I like to use this diagnosis to make the point. With cerebral palsy, a lot of the time, there's a very hard time modulating strength and effort. Modulating means like deciding how much to give, trying to give a medium amount. Things are either super easy and they can do it relaxed, or they go into a full reflex and they extend or like contract part of their body when they try to put in a modulated middle amount of effort. And it's a big sliding scale. Some people can put in, more modulated or determined effort than other, but in general, that's difficult for those with CP. So where the joystick sits matters enormously as to whether they can reliably control their own power wheelchair or even control something like maybe a switch for communication device. If the joystick is too far away, then you may be having to activate, or they may be having to activate too many muscles with too much effort to drive. And on a power wheelchair, we're not talking just about joysticks. This could be a head array. Could be like maybe 3 switches, positioned around your head. Those need to be in spots where you can hit them reliably, consistently, and accurately, ideally with low effort, because that's your means of moving. And I think the simplest question is, put the hardware aside for a second, like the physical adjustments possible. If you could magically move that joystick or that switch anywhere at all, maybe put it a little closer to your body, maybe up here, maybe, like almost like in a tray right in front of you. Is there somewhere where it would feel easier to control? Usually as the patient sitting, you would know the answer to that. For some people, it's easier to have the joystick like right next to their belly because control proximal to the body is much easier to modulate than with your arm fully extended. Really just try like picking up a weight close to your body versus far away. It's super obvious why. On a head array, it's maybe taking too much travel to reach those switches, and that's what's costing you all the effort. These are very much Goldilocks zones problems, and you need to find just the right spot. And a consequence of being able to do this well is the setup underneath it. Because you're using your extremities for function, it's extremely important that your proximal stability is set up and secured first. In other words, to make the best use of your hands, your elbows, your head as a control method, everything from your pelvis radiating outwards needs to be properly supported first. So your pelvis, your thighs, maybe thigh guides to keep your legs under control, a seat belt, lateral supports, maybe an abdominal belt that goes across your belly. If your joystick or your controls are in the wrong place, they can easily leave you feeling fatigued and worn out from using your wheelchair without you really ever realizing that was the issue. All right, number 4, this is one of my passions and favorites. It's the one I opened up with, the one I believe with my whole chest. Everything we've covered, cushions, the support of the wheelchair, the positioning of your controls. All of this is about making one position better. Here's the thing. The best posture is to move. I don't care how expensive the cushion is or how perfectly your chair is set up in that one position. The best posture is moving frequently. And that's what we all do unconsciously. And unfortunately, in a wheelchair, it takes much more conscious effort to do that. So like back at the top of this video, if an able-bodied person shifts constantly without ever thinking about it, that's the system keeping them comfortable, fluid, not so tight. No one posture is comfortable for a long period of time. What actually lets you stay somewhere for a long stretch is movement. And if your body can't move on its own, that movement has to come from somewhere else. On power wheelchairs, it should be built in. You have powered seat functions like tilt, recline, elevating leg rests, powered standing even on some chairs. These are not luxury features. They're not bells and whistles that are there to feel nice or look cool. They exist for clinical reason so that you can move your body around in space throughout the day. We all do it. You have to too. Instead of letting 8-10 hours of stiffness pile up in your hips, your low back, and your knees, you need to move. Here's a sign that at the end of the day, you're not moving enough. When you transfer out of the chair to bed, to your couch, wherever it is, are your hips and knees really stiff and sore? And you have to like really slowly move and extend them to unwind? That's the signal that you didn't move enough in your chair. Now, back to this patient of mine. For 40 years, she thought cushions just really sucked. What actually was happening is that she had never, not once, in 40 years, using chairs pretty much since birth, she had never once used her power wheelchair to tilt back and recline and shift the weight off of her bottom. The combination of those two is actually pretty magical, and I'll cover that in a future video. To move the grand majority of weight off of her bottom onto her backrest, flatten her spine, stretch a little bit, extend, give her bottom a rest, change the angle between her torso and her legs. Elevate her legs to move the angle between her lower leg and her upper leg or thighs. She hadn't realized that tilt and recline are not just about the small shifts between like an active posture and like a relaxing watching TV posture. The whole point of those is that you can extend and move your whole body throughout the day, using the wheelchair to do it. Since your body cannot do that on its own, and the rest of us do that constantly, unconsciously. We stand up, move, sit down, stretch. You have a wheelchair paid for by your insurance to help you do exactly that. I taught her this in her 40s, which is crazy, which is really crazy. For 40 years, she had never been articulating her joints, getting the weight off of her bottom. Now, she had a much more generous loading zone for tissue. She had a bigger butt, and she was pretty light overall, kind of short. So she had always been able to skate by on those long days without alleviating pressure on her own. But guess what? She got older. We all do. The tissue gets weaker, less vital, less blood flow. And eventually the cost of sitting for many hours in a row had been building up. And that's when she realized the best posture is moving. Use a combination of tilt, recline, elevating leg rest, maybe standing if you're fortunate enough to have that on your chair, to move your body throughout the day. It's vital to your comfort. And no matter what cushion you have, no matter what supports underneath you, none of them are good enough to make that need go away. None of them, not one, none. Especially, I'm talking right now to spinal cord new injury patients. Congratulations, you made it the first 3 months. 6 months, a year without doing pressure reliefs and you didn't get a wound. Cut it out. You need to do that now. Boy, that's a whole nother rant for another video. All right, so I've been setting up these chairs for over 10 years now, and in my opinion, this is the number one cause of fatigue in power wheelchairs. You are not using your powered seat functions enough to move around, because I meet people all the time who have tilt and recline on their wheelchair, and they use it sometimes, maybe a couple times a day, and they only go back like this far. And so many of them have never even had it explained to them what those functions are actually for. That's the annoying simple thing. Not only is it simple to understand what these functions are for, it's simple to teach someone how to use them. And this is the bulk of the cost of a power chair. It's like out of many, many thousands of dollars, it might be like half is the cost of these actuators to move around and keep your body healthier, less stiff, less degraded. Think of it this way. If you're able-bodied and watching this, imagine an 8-hour road trip. What I like to say, because I live here in Los Angeles, is like imagine driving to Las Vegas and back with 0 brakes. You don't get out of the car one time. You should really viscerally feel how tiring that would be on your body. And then imagine you do this drive every single day of your life. It's unbelievable. It's unbelievable not only that, that people have to do this. They have to sit in a chair and move and have that be their primary source of mobility. Like, we would never, ever consider this. And that's when you realize it actually has very little to do with the diagnosis being exhausted. It actually has way more to do just with the fact that you are sitting all day. It's not about having a spinal cord injury. It's not about having a TBI or MS. This is actually just a consequence of being static, off your feet, sitting for that many hours a day in a row, every day, always. I cannot stress this enough. And it's something that gives me a lot of empathy for wheelchair users. So I'm going to do a whole separate video on the combination of tilt recline, because this is one of the most fundamental features of a power chair. Necessary, in my opinion, for almost anybody sitting in a chair all day long. I'm not going to shortchange it here. It's actually a game-changing once you understand how to use these. I have spoken to many patients who never knew, and then after I show them how to tilt and recline, they say it's life-improving, kind of game-changing for them too. But for today, if your chair moves, use it. Use it to move you. So why does this actually matter? Like, going back to my patient, she was no quitter. I mean, she was pretty amazing, a go-getter in her own right. She had work to do. She worked in nonprofits and accessibility like her whole life. She just dealt with pain every day, which meant like the second 4 hours of her day every day were very painful. She would do these tiny little minor adjustments over and over again, thinking that she was doing something meaningful, and it wasn't. So that's what this fatigue really steals. It's not just your comfort. It steals hours of your day, hours of your life. So when you're wiped out in the middle of the day and you still got the whole second half ahead of you, you've got 3 options. You quit, you push through it, or you learn what the root causes are so you can address them. Now you've got an idea of several factors that cause fatigue for powered wheelchair users, and you've got some really good questions to ask. One of my favorite pieces of wisdom from Tony Robbins, he says, the quality of your life is in direct proportion to the quality of the questions you ask. And I want to be careful here. Everything I said about discomfort assumes that you can feel that area. And so if you have reduced or absent sensation, you just don't get that warning. At least not directly. You don't get the physical feedback from that part of your body. You may just feel like, this chair sucks. I don't know why. I just don't like it. So for you, it's not waiting for a direct signal like pain. It's going to be something that you have to schedule. Schedule your pressure release, schedule moving, especially with spinal cord injuries. Scheduling the times you alleviate pressure to move your body is necessary. It may not be necessary today, but over the course of your life, there will be a time where you regret not scheduling it. All right, if you've got like a deep red or dark area of skin that does not fade after you've been off of your bottom for a while, especially underneath those bony prominences, or you've got like numbness that's worsening, call your medical or seating professional today. This video is educational and it does not replace an actual evaluation with your seating team. It's meant to help you understand what your fatigue is trying to tell you so that you can ask better questions and have a better quality life. So if you actually want to go find your own problems, I made you a wheelchair fit checklist. It's free, takes about 5 minutes, and it walks you through exactly what to look at on your own chair so that you stop guessing and you know what to ask your seating team for. The link's in the description. And if you want a second set of eyes after that, I offer wheelchair pain and positioning consultations. I'm taking a number of them at no charge right now because I want real cases I can teach from, anonymized, with your permission, right here on the channel. Fill out the checklist and email it to me at info@adaptivesolutions.com and you're in. And if you're interested to try and receive one of these visits at no charge, comment on the post below. Next in the series, we're going to talk in depth about tilt and recline, what each of them does individually, and why the combination of them is significantly more powerful. And do me a favor before you go, comment below, tell me whether your chair has tilt, how many times a day you actually use it. I read the comments, I respond, and I want to know how widespread this problem is. Subscribe so that you don't miss the next video, give it a like, and share this with someone that you know would benefit. I know that you know someone, clinician or patient, friend, someone that would benefit from pressure relieving more often. Thank you so much for your time and your attention and interest, and I'll see you in the next video.